welcome back to the channel. A little bit of time has passed since the Harvard president resigned, and I think it's time that I actually talk a little bit about plagiarism and the whole thing that happened there. So, I closely followed the Claudine Gay plagiarism charges, the resignation, the broader context around her comments in the congressional hearing about Israel, and I have a few thoughts. I've written about some of these things on my Substack, but I've had a little bit more time to think about it, and I wanted to give you all some thoughts on plagiarism. All right, I'm going to confine my remarks to plagiarism largely. I understand fully that there are many reasons why people wanted her to go, particularly her remarks to Congress, and that was a big motivating energy behind why people found and why they promoted the plagiarism accusations in that moment. They found a vulnerability. But she should have expected it. I mean, this is the thing that people were saying. Well, they're only looking into her because they don't like her point of view on another issue. Well, you're the president of Harvard. Eventually, someone's not going to like your point of view on some issue. They're going to look through your closet, and they're looking for skeletons. The problem is, you shouldn't actually have a bag of bones in there. And that's kind of a paraphrase of a line that appeared in the Atlantic magazine. So that was a well-done piece on Claudine Gay. She did have the bag of bones. She was, in fact, guilty of the charge of plagiarism. So it really helped her critics to accuse her of plagiarism, knowing that she had, in fact, been a serial plagiarist. She wasn't just a little bit of a plagiarist. So this is the thing that I think people missed from the whole thing. She didn't just plagiarize one sentence in one paper out of 500 publications. She plagiarized in 50% of her scholarly work. There were 11 papers and her dissertation. In 50% of that scholarly work, there was plagiarism. There was even plagiarism in the acknowledgments to one of the pieces she wrote. She thanked some people. Even the wording she used around that acknowledgement had plagiarism. She was copying and pasting other people's sentences, and she wasn't putting it in quotes. That's the gist of what she did wrong. Now, some people say, well, those sentences weren't that important. They weren't brilliant sentences. She wasn't copying and pasting Shakespeare. Of course, she was copying and pasting the most banal, dumb sentences. But that speaks even more to how bad a scholar she must be. What am I to think? If she is such a lazy scholar, she's copying and pasting trivial sentences. She doesn't even have the energy to rewrite those sentences. She can't even put it in her own words. That speaks so poorly of her. I don't know what to tell you. I couldn't believe it. The fact that you're plagiarizing trivial things, that's not a good thing. That just means that you're even worse at you didn't even plagiarize the good stuff. What's wrong with you? The next thing. People say that, it was just a sentence here or there. It wasn't. It was in most of her work. The next point. She only has 11 papers. What are we even talking about here? She has 11 papers. She's the president of Harvard. I think I have 500 papers. I'm nowhere near the president of Harvard. I'm not even the division chief. And then there's the chair of the department, and then there's another layer, another layer, and then finally there's the dean, and that's at this university, and then to be the dean of Harvard, and then the president of Harvard. I mean, she's at the pinnacle of academic medicine. Or not academic, a pinnacle of academia. Not even in medicine, the pinnacle of beyond medicine. She's the pinnacle of all of the academy. She has 11 publications. That's terrible. And half of them have plagiarism. That's terrible. I don't know how anyone can defend it. And then some people say, well, you can be a good administrator and not a great scholar. That's okay. Sure, that's okay for, some random 7th tier university. But surely the president of Harvard can be somebody who is both a good administrator and a leading scholar. Now, some people don't like all of Larry Summers' views. I don't think I even know all of Larry Summers' views. But one thing about Larry Summers that you can't contest is that he was both a competent administrator and he was a leading scholar. He literally pushed the field in many directions of economics. He's a brilliant person. So it's not too much to ask that the president of Harvard be somebody who's a little bit of both. And in fact, it might be helpful because if you were in fact a great scholar, you might have a reverence for academic freedom. She ultimately didn't have a reverence for academic freedom, and that actually came back to bite her, but I won't talk about that. I'll put that aside for now. I just want to focus on the plagiarism. One of the people she copied and pasted from, he actually said on Twitter, I'm a defender of Claudine Gay, but even I know that's plagiarism, because it is plagiarism. And to me, the worst part about her scandal wasn't that she plagiarized. It wasn't that she has 11 papers. It was that people in the academy who would expel a student for doing what she did, they defended her actions and said, that's not plagiarism, that's, quote, duplicative language, or that's excusable. The moment you erode your standards just to defend someone you like, you have lost all principles and you have debased yourself. And ironically, her opponents achieved a much bigger victory than just getting her out of the position. They debased the very institution of Harvard and all of the professors from many universities who defended what she did, which is absolutely and always unacceptable. No one would be allowed to do what she did. She said, well, I tried to correct the record. That's not good enough. A student would be expelled. They won't get to just cross that out and, now rewrite. We're at the, you would be expelled. What are you thinking? She went to Exeter. She went to Princeton. She went to Harvard. She knows you can't plagiarize. I mean, there's no excuse. She's been in this world for a long time. Okay, the next thing. Somebody said, well, isn't it funny that it took all this time for these allegations to come out? Well, that speaks even worse to the scholarship. I mean, how shitty is your work that no one's even reading it? I mean, that's what it's telling me. No one is reading your papers to even know there's plagiarism because your papers are shitty and there's only 11 of them and they don't even detect the plagiarism until they're looking for something to hang you by. Of course, that speaks even more to how bad your work is, because if your work was really popular, a lot of people would be reviewing it with a fine-tooth comb, and they would have found this a long time ago. And what does it say about Harvard? She wasn't just president, she was president for a few months, but she was the dean of the Faculty of Arts and Letters for many years. And they never detected all this plagiarism. This is terrible. Someone says, well, if you took artificial intelligence and looked through everyone's publications, everyone would be fired for this reason. Well, one, I think they should do that. I mean, I would be curious to know what's the distribution of copying and pasting other people's language. But two, I don't think everyone would be fired. I don't think so. I think few people would be extreme outliers in terms of the body of their scholarship that contains plagiarism. She's got to be on the extreme end. I mean, it's in more than half of her published work. And I think those people should face some disciplinary action because it's just something you don't do. It's something you don't do because it's intellectual laziness. It's appropriating somebody else's idea. We live in a world where the only currency in the academy is the idea itself. I've had ideas stolen from me. Don't get me wrong. I've had people call me on the phone and ask me what I thought about something. They published that idea and give me any credit. But one thing they didn't do is they didn't actually copy and paste my words. They weren't that lazy. They were at least more clever in how they stole the idea. They weren't that lazy. And when you're more clever, it's actually harder to find that person and prove that they stole my idea. It's my word against theirs. So I don't dwell too much on that because I have lots of ideas, and I published 500 papers, and I'm not nearly at her level. So to me, I'm just baffled by how she got to where she got with 11 papers and half plagiarism. And other people say, well, there are all these other reasons. Don't forget that all these other forces wanted her out for all these different reasons. That's separate. I mean, I understand that that's happening, but at the end of the day, how do you defend the fact that the president of Harvard has a terrible academic track record? It's loaded with plagiarism. There's not that many papers. It took so long to find the plagiarism because probably nobody's reading those papers. That just says it's just so bad. It's so bad. And to go from Larry Summers to somebody whose academic track record is so poor, speaks so poorly of Harvard University. So she has to be fired, and so she ultimately resigned. There's a nice New York Times article about how she did it. There's one more way in which these Harvard professors debase themselves. So obviously, one of the people who is taking a lot of credit online for knocking her out is Christopher Rufo, who is sort of a right-of-center activist, journalist activist. And he said that it's my, efforts that got her out. We timed the reporting in such a way to really punish her, and it's a success. And he says, I also went to Harvard. I think he went to Harvard Extension School, and he had a master's or something like that. Somebody can tell me if I'm wrong. And you know what? Don't put it in the comments anymore. Follow me on Instagram and DM me because that's the only way I can read anything. If you really have something important to say, don't do it if you got some trivialities. Okay, so Chris Rufo's taking a lot of credit. Many Harvard professors don't like Chris Rufo, and this one Harvard professor debased herself where she has a lengthy thread about how everybody knows that the Harvard Extension School is not really going to Harvard, and we have a low standard to just get all these people in, and if you get that degree, you're not getting a real Harvard degree. And then later, after I'm sure some people talked to her about it, she has to come on Twitter and apologize and say, oh, actually, anyone who gets a degree from Harvard is a meaningful degree. And she has to just completely eat her words, which to me is just so pathetic in so many ways. Number one, look, she said what everyone's thinking. We all know that Harvard Extension School and Penn Extension School and all these big universities, extension programs, only exist to get a lot of people to give you money so that they can make more money. That's the purpose of the program. Let's be honest. We all know that. Everyone believes that. Everyone knows that. Okay, she said it because she was pissed at Christopher Rufo. That's embarrassing because she teaches in that program. Okay, so she says it. Whatever. It's what everyone knows. In fact, if anything, Harvard shouldn't have these cash grab programs. They should have a set of programs with a similar standard. But if you have a program that just tries to get a lot of people in to make a lot of money, of course, naturally, the admission standard is going to be a little bit lower. It's just the nature of it. So she says that because she's pissed at Chris Rufo, so he kind of baited her into saying that. But what's even worse to me is that she comes back and is apologizing for what she said and takes it all back. Just totally insincere. Everyone knows she actually did believe what she said. She's just lying in the apology. The apology is nothing but a lie. And she's obviously lying because somebody who works with her told her, you can't go around saying this and we'd like you to apologize. And she just completely capitulates to that person like a spineless jellyfish and apologizes. And so she humiliates herself twice. I think he's totally right. She humiliates herself twice and she further debases Harvard. Wow. There is a path forward for Harvard if they're actually going to pay attention. And that is, did you know, Harvard, you could actually take advantage of your institutional role and have debates on controversial topics. During the pandemic, I believe you had 0 debates on school closure, 0 debates on masking kids, 0 debates on any of the major policy choices, even though you have huge hundreds and hundreds of faculty of health policy. They're all whisper quiet on these issues because they're all so scared of reputation. So the moment you forfeit your ability to debate controversial issues, there are many other controversial issues that cannot be debated there. The moment they forfeit those abilities to debate those things, then naturally people are going to carve you up. And if you want to regain credibility and to show that you are the beacon of knowledge, you should host more of these debates. You should actually allow for dissenting viewpoints. You should even have a debate. Is the Harvard Extension School worth having? Is it up to the Harvard degree standard? Have that debate, actually, and have this woman debate her position that actually the standards are lower and it's not the same as a real Harvard degree, and then get somebody on the other side to debate it. I'd love to hear that debate. But to just force people to say, the quote unquote right opinion, that's pathetic. And her apology is pathetic. The fact he baited her into saying that is pathetic. Ultimately, the real loser here is the university. It's not Claudine Gay. The university looks terrible. They've got a president who's a plagiarist, who's plagiarized so much, only has 11 papers, and nobody read those papers for decades to even find the plagiarism. They're just promoted her all the way to the top. Nobody even noticed the plagiarism. What does that even say? I want to contrast it with Mark Tesler-Levine. The Stanford president was also resigned over photoshopping Western blots, which basically means there's some image duplication in some of his published work, and he's retracted a paper more recently. Now, do I think that there is image duplicate? Do I think his work is shitty? Absolutely. I'm 100% sure that there's some rot in his work, and probably a lot of his scholarship is shitty. And do I think he should resign as president? Absolutely, he should resign as president. You can't be president of Stanford with a body of scholarship that's riddled with image duplication. But do I actually think he duplicated the images? That's a tough one. If you put a gun to my head and you said, did Mark Tesler-Levine duplicate those images himself? I would say, honestly, my guess is no. Somebody who worked under him in a culture of pressure where he kept telling him probably, you need to get results, they probably took the leap of duplicating the images. Can someone rid me of this pesky priest? But I don't think he himself actually duplicated the images. Now, I don't think that forgives him. He put his name on that paper, a lot of image duplication. He can't be president of Stanford. Sure, that's all true. But I don't think he actually did the deed himself. Did she actually do the plagiarism herself? Yeah, I think she did. Obviously she did, because she's sometimes the only author of the paper. So who else could have done it? The fairies? No, had to be her. So in many ways, it's actually worse what she did. That's another point that people miss. It is worse what she did than Tesler-Levine. So plagiarism. I don't know. Should we be so uptight about plagiarism? That's a separate question. I think Malcolm Gladwell has a really brilliant essay called Something Borrowed in the New York Times, where he talks about somebody who copied his work but turned it into something different. I think the standards in music are different. Many musicians sample somebody else's beat or hook or rhythm and put that in their song, and they turn it into a different work of art. Does the Academy have to be so rigid about plagiarism? I don't know. But typically we have been, and this is the rules for a long time, and in part because what we're trading is ideas, and the moment you start to copy someone's language, at some point you're copying their ideas, and you're copying the logic of the paragraph. And that's a point people miss. The way in which the sentences are structured, the order in which the ideas are presented, that's the logic of the paragraph. That's also something important. Even if the sentences are banal, the logic of the paragraph is the other person's logic, not your logic. Also, it's not so hard. It is not hard to read things, to put them away, to think about them, and to think, how might I put it even better than what I read? Or what was the take-home point, and how might I say it? That's not hard. And if you're so lazy you can't do that, you really shouldn't be at a university. And you shouldn't be the president of Harvard. That's for Damn sure. And that's what I find so baffling about this. So, Harvard president, to me, the plagiarism in and of itself, that's it. You don't need any other reason to let her go. That's so bad. And if they get another president with a shoddy academic track record and a history of plagiarism, no one's going to take him seriously. You need to get some people who are real scholars. I mean, it's not too much to ask that a few positions in the academy have somebody who's both a good scholar and a good administrator. I don't think that's too much to ask. So, those are my thoughts. Plagiarism. I say that as somebody who's published a lot of papers, a couple books myself. So, you like this video, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, comment, leave a message below. I think subscribe to the channel. If you don't subscribe. Follow me on Instagram. That's the place to DM me if you want to reach me or have me read what you're saying. And follow me on Twitter. I have a Substack called Vinay Prasad's Observations and Thoughts. You should subscribe. So, until next time.